This revision session is about the important map skill of grid references. As well as being a life skill, it's also going to be tested several times on your exam, perhaps on all three of the Geography GCSE papers. The Ordnance Survey is the company that produces the maps we use most frequently in geography. The UK is divided into a grid system. A large set of squares, 500 kilometres square, have been put across the UK, and each of these has been given a letter. These in turn are divided into 100 kilometre square squares, and these are given two letters, each one beginning with the letter from the 500 kilometre square square. So all of the squares in 500 kilometre square N begin with N and then have another letter afterwards in sequence. This grid is the basis for the grid of smaller squares, which is placed over all Ordnance Survey maps for us to be able to identify where places are. So that's what the grid reference system is all about, being able to identify where places are on a map. 4-figure grid references are used to identify a square on a map, and 6-figure grid references are used to reference an exact spot on the map. We're going to start now by looking at 4-figure grid references. Here's a map of a simple landscape. It looks quite pleasant, obviously good for tourists with a few caravan sites and picnic sites. There's a car park and a telephone box and a couple of roads running through it. We start off by dividing this map into a grid. Lines called eastings are placed on the map to start our grid. These show how far east across the map you've gone. These lines are numbered in sequence. This map starts at 11 and goes through 12, 13, 14, 15 and 16. Next, lines called northings are placed on the grid, and these show how far north you go on the map. Again, these are numbered in sequence. Numbers in this case going from 58 up to 61 as you head further north. So before we go any further, let's just shrink that map a little bit and have a think about the sequence that we're going to use these numbers in. You probably remember this phrase from work we've done before. You always use the numbers along the bottom of the map first, and the phrase we use there is along the corridor. You then use the numbers that go up the side, the northings, and the phrase there is up the stairs. So remember the phrase along the corridor and up the stairs. It's easy to remember if you happen to have a house with a hallway and a staircase. You have to go along that corridor to get to the staircase. So back to our map. We're going to try and look for a square on this map, and we're choosing this one with the picnic table in. I'd like you to imagine that you're going a run across the map. The last line that you cross to get into the square you're after is your finishing line for your race. In this case, the last line, the tape that you have to break through to finish your race, is 1-5. Then go a race up the stairs, and the last line that you have to cross, in this case going up the stairs, is 5-8. So the grid reference for our square is a combination of those two numbers, 1-5-5-8. See if you can calculate the 4-figure grid reference for this square in the middle of the map. Pause the recording here if you need a little more time. Well, as we go along the corridor, the last line that we cross to get into the square would be 1-3. And then as we go up the stairs, the last line we cross would be 5-9. So our grid reference for this square is 1-3-5-9. But what if we want to locate a point more accurately than just a grid square? That's when we need a 6-figure grid reference to find an exact spot on the map. Let's go back to our map again. We're going to try and find the 6-figure grid reference of this camping and caravan site. You should all have worked out that this square is called 1359. A six-figure grid reference uses these numbers, but instead of having two numbers from along the corridor and two from up the stairs, you need three from along the corridor and three from up the stairs. So we put in extra spaces. 13 space 59 space. Let's zoom in on the square to make it a little bit easier. The first thing you need to do is find the centre of the thing that you're trying to locate. In this case, it's the camping and caravan site. So we look for the centre of the symbol. Next, we go for our imaginary run to break through the last line to get into the square. As we saw before, this was the line 1, 3. So those are the first two numbers of our six-figure grid reference. But we need a third number from along the corridor before we can move on to up the stairs. And so we need to imagine that we continue our run to get level with the centre of the campsite. In our heads, we divide the square up into 10 equal chunks, starting at 0 on the line 1, 3 and going up in tenths. Then we imagine that our run continues, as I said, until we're level with the middle of the campsite. And we look how many tenths across the square we've gone. In this case, we're somewhere between 2 and 3, and either of those answers would do, but we're slightly closer to 2, and so that is what we're going to choose as our answer. So the three numbers from along the corridor are now 1, 3, 2. Next, we go up the stairs. We run our race until we get to the last line that we cross to get into the square, and as we saw before, that line is 5, 9. So we add those numbers to our sequence. But then we have to continue our race to get our third number, and again we continue until we get level with the middle of the campsite. We place our grid on, and in this case we're about 8 tenths of the way up. And so we add our final number, 8, into our sequence. So the six-figure grid reference for this point on the map is 132598. We don't put this reference in brackets and we don't put any commas between the numbers. Let's have a look at our map again and see if you can work out the answer to these 4 questions. Pause the recording here and start it again when you've got your answers. Let's see how you did. The grid reference of the telephone box is 1259. The reference of the car park is 1459. The six-figure grid reference of the telephone box is 122594. Now remember, the third number and the sixth number here could be slightly out. So perhaps you might have said 1, 2, 3 for the first 3 numbers, and that would be okay. And the six-figure reference of the road junction is 127593. Again, that third and sixth number can be 1 out, and you'll probably still get the mark. Okay, time for something a little more realistic. Here's an actual piece of an Ordnance Survey map with the grid numbers written along the bottom and along the left-hand side. Pause the recording here and answer the questions on the right-hand side of this screen. So here are the answers. Mark your work to see how you got on. Remember that the third and sixth number on six-figure grid references can be 1 out. If you still think you need a little bit of practice at 4 and 6-figure grid references, then the Ordnance Survey's Map Zone website is as good a place as any. The link at the top of this slide takes you to the home page where you can click on the Map Skills section and look at all sorts of different map skills, such as the use of scale and distance and grid references, etc., etc. There are also sections on general geography and games and quizzes that you could get involved with. The link at the bottom of this slide takes you straight through to the pages about grid references.